Alex, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my November wrap-up. In the month of November, I have managed to read 12 books. I have started 3 series. I have binge read an entire series. I have continued to make progress in 3 series, and then I have also finished 3 series. So a lot of work on my TBR series at the moment, which is very exciting. I am going to do this based on the way that I have sectioned it off throughout the month, which was the series that I started, then I'm going to do the series that I binge read, then I'm going to do the series that I continued, and then I'm going to do the series that I finished. So starting with the 3 series that I started, this was for my Esme vlog, in which I read 3 books based on my friend Esme's recommendations. I let her take over my TBR for a week, and I ended up starting 3 series. The first of which is the Blood and Steel saga, with the first book being The Fangs of War by E.J. Dobble. And this one is an epic dark fantasy in which we are in a world where there are gods wanting to use the earth as somewhat a playing field for their war, and we are following a kingdom in which the king has just died following a rebellion, and therefore his commanders have instated martial law. We are following it from multiple perspectives: those who are all in favor for this war that is being headed by these generals, we have the general that is now in charge, we have the perspective of his second in command, for want of a better word, his enforcer, we have the perspective of a general who completely opposes the regime and the way that the authority is currently undertaking this conflict, and we get it from a load of different angles with a load of different opinions. We follow characters that at least are driven by a moral compass. We follow characters who are not, who are very amoral. I had a really good time with this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The plot with this one is, in a way, more for the characters to have something to do in this first book, to introduce the characters to you. That is actually a setup for the first book in a series that I actually really like, because it gives you a chance to get invested in the characters before the real plot actually kicks in, so that then when things actually start going to shit, you are already invested emotionally, and therefore the stakes feel higher. So I really did appreciate that about this first book and the way it opened the series. There were a couple of niggling things when it came to the writing style, which is due to the lack of editor. Literally, there was no editor. It was edited by the author and his wife. Thank you, Esme, for that information. So there isn't an editor, and you can tell they did a good job, but you can tell that it's not had an editor. For a book that doesn't have an editor, it's a really well written one, and especially because the prose is stunning at times. But obviously, if you're an experienced reader, you'll just notice that there's repetitions that happen, there are clunky dialogue moments, there are just bits that, you know, clearly a professional editor would have been able to pick up on. I don't think that detracted too much from my enjoyment, and I still had a fantastic time with this. So if you're looking for a dark fantasy, I would highly recommend. One that I listened to on audio is The Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan, and this one is a fantasy murder mystery. Sort of. In this story, we are following Inkwell Featherfield, who is essentially like a quirky, artful dodger, and he is roped into this investigation where there is a reporter that is looking into the seeming murder of one of the men in this town, and we have him contracting ink to go investigate the dead man's house before it's all cleared out, so that he can get some information on why investigators are pretending that it was an accidental death instead of a murder. And then it turns out that he finds something that makes these horrific spectres that are very murderous want to seek out ink. So then, lo and behold, he is saved by a group of notorious outlaws that everyone deems like public enemy number 1. And it goes from there. It has a really cozy section in the middle there. It's got some epic political fantasy going in alongside it. The tone is very whimsical, but not lyrical. It's not like purple prosy. It's more just very light and airy, and gives you lots of room to get to know the characters and the world, which I really enjoyed. The cast of characters is absolutely phenomenal, and this is one that on Corpow got 4.5, but I have given it 5 stars on Goodreads because it's a phenomenal book. And the last one that I read for that vlog, and the last series that I started this month, is The Legacy of the Brightwash, which is the first book in the Tainted Dominion series by Crystal Matar. In this story, we're following Tasway Blackwood, who is a regulation officer. And the regulation officer's job is to ensure that those who have magic or who are tainted comply with the law. So basically, if you have magic, you have less rights, you have less autonomy, and you are heavily supervised. He is essentially a caseworker in which he oversees magical beings to make sure that they are compliant. He processes their lives, essentially. And he's always believed in the authority, and he's always believed in what they stand for. However, 3 years of watching his son wither away in this prison known as the Rift because he didn't comply has been tearing down Tasway. So when a young girl shows up on the banks of the river and she is mutilated and tattooed and no one seems to care who killed her and who did this to her, he decides to investigate on his own, and he then begins to understand more about his society. Now, this is a fascinating one to me because it did a really good job of being a murder mystery. It did a really good job of being a dystopian, and it did a really good job of being an epic fantasy, all in one. And I love when you have series that mess around with genres and play with the tropes that come with different genres and smushing them together. And I think that was handled really well. I love the other perspectives that we get in here as well. We do get Tasway's son, Jason. We do get Stella, who is one of the women that Tasway is in charge of processing. Loved the writing style in here. It was so compulsively readable. This is one that you would not know is self-pub if you read it. Like, I don't think that anything to do with the editing or the way that it is presented, nothing I think is really a tell that this is self-pub. Now, I like the sound of self-pub. It's not one of those where it's like, I think that traditional pub is better. I do really like the sound of self-pub because it does push outside of the box. But with this one, it had so much going on that then having this really neat and tidy and immersive writing style just worked really well. This is one, though, if anything to do with children is a content warning for you. Obviously, we have a murdered girl at the start of the book. But anything to do with children is a trigger. Look up extensive content warnings because there are many, and I would highly recommend that you go in with as much caution as possible. I am happy to discuss those content warnings with you if you want me to, but there are a lot, so do bear that in mind. But 5 stars, book of the month. Loved it. As to the series that I binged, I did do a reading vlog in which I read the entire Nevernight Chronicle by J. Kristoff. The first book being Nevernight, the second being God's Grave, and the third being Dark Dawn. I do have a dedicated series review for this series on the way, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But I ended up giving books 1 and 2 3 stars. So there were 4-star reads, but things that had intrinsic problems that I couldn't overlook that I docked a star for. So enjoyment-wise, they're 4 stars, but in terms of reviewer critique, they are 3 stars. Book 3, the final one, was a 5-star read that got docked to a 4. This series follows Mia Colvert, who is the daughter of a justice in this world who is executed for treason before her very eyes, and then she is left orphaned. So she joins the Red Church of Etreia to train to become an assassin and seek revenge on those who harmed her family. This is an assassin story, it's a revenge story, it's a dark fantasy, and there were a lot of things in here that I really enjoyed. I love the writing style. I can understand how it'd be completely hit or miss for people. It's told in multiple ways. You have the past timeline parts that come up in italics, then you have the main bulk of the story, and then you also have footnotes which are kind of world building, essentially. And they're all told with a very comedic tone, but also very dark tone. It's very satirizing in a very engaging and entertaining way. I absolutely loved the way that this story unfolded. I'm really sad that the issues that I had with it were so persistent because there were so many things that definitely should have made this like a new favourite series. The issues that I had with it include the representation of women, which was very much like you could tell they were written by men. My other issue is that of the over-sexualization of a child, and the other one being the over-sexualization of bisexuality. I do go more in depth in it in my review and also in my vlog, so if you want to know more thoughts, they're not ones that I think are done with a level of harm that would make it unreadable, or else I literally would have DNF'd. I still enjoyed the series. There were just things that occasionally I would notice and would take me out of the situation a little bit. Therefore, it was more like an annoyance than a huge problem, but it was a persistent annoyance, which docked it a star. For series continued, the first one I'm going to talk about is the Discworld series, and I read Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett, which is the third book in publication order for the Discworld series. And in this one, we are following the witches. It's the first of the witches books. Now, I am enjoying my time reading Discworld, but there are definitely not ones that I am like, yeah, let's keep going. Just the occasional Discworld book thrown onto the TBR works better for me. They're very small, but they actually take me longer than I ever anticipate they're going to, because I'm just a bit like, what? Sometimes it is very entertaining, it is fun, it's not quite my humour. Absurdism is a bit hit or miss for me, so the absurdism side doesn't work that well for me, but the social satire is absolutely astounding. So there's always such a good amount of social critique that makes me want to continue reading them. So despite the fact that I am not absolutely enamored with parts of the book, it's still worth reading, and I am still looking forward to continuing to work my way through the Discworld. I actually don't know if the Witches and the Wizards series are the same series. So in this one, we're mostly following wizards, and it is a takedown of academia. It is mocking institutions, prejudices, and their pomposity is, and I think it's done in a very interesting way, especially because we also have discussions around gender exclusion within elite academia, which was definitely rife when this was being written, but is obviously still a prevalent issue. So I did find that amusing. I am always glad to have that conversation in my head with Terry Pratchett, which is what he provides, and I am always excited to see what the next discussion is going to be. Next up, I continued my read of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is part 2 of this book, because in the UK the paperbacks are split in two, and I definitely liked this more. It's still got a 3-star, but it's a 3.5, so it's closer to a 4-star, but I have given it 3 stars on Goodreads. I liked the ending. I don't quite get to the Sanderlanche the same way everyone else seems to. I did find it amped up the story. It did make me interested enough to continue, but I don't feel like I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like one of the best things ever written. It's just like, oh, clever, I like it, is the most of a reaction I get from it. It's entertaining. This was more engaging as well, because there were definitely perspectives in the first one that was just like, not again. This one, it was a bit better. I think that, I don't know if it means that we've had more of the perspectives that I like, or the perspectives that I dislike were less over the top. I do like Kaladin's perspective. I think he's one that I will maybe like more. He might grow even more on me. He might be a character that I really love, but I do really like reading his perspective. I don't understand what all the hate for Shallan is. Like, she's not the most exciting person in the world, but I don't dislike her. And I kind of thought I would, because I don't know how I feel about Sanderson's women from the ones that I have read. So I thought I would have more issues with Shallan than I did. Dalinar at the minute is probably the perspective that I not least like, because I don't like roll my eyes to read it or don't want to read it. It's just the one that he's a personality that I am least in love with out of the characters. But I think that's my problem at the minute. I am not really enamored with any of the characters. I'm mostly interested in the series, as opposed to like, oh my god, I can't wait to keep reading. I'm hoping that eventually that will kick in, but I kind of figured that like 1,000 pages should be enough to get me to fall in love with these characters, but alas, at the moment I like them and I am cautiously interested. The last one that I continued is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, the 4th book, Wizard and Glass, being the one that was on my TBR. And this series, there's no point really in me talking about this series. I might as well just do a series review when I'm done with them. It was engaging. I did find it fun, but it was too long. Why is this book this long? There's so much that just could have been cut. And I feel like King's editors are afraid to cut bits out because of how prolific he is or something, because this book did not need to be this long. I like the cast of characters that we have now, because in the first couple, where you're mostly just following Roland, he's really obnoxious. Susanna, Eddie, Jake and Oi do make it for a more exciting little fellowship that we've got going here. So it is getting better. It's got 3 stars. It's fine. I'm enjoying them enough to continue. I've told my husband at this point, if anything gets 2 stars again, then I'm just stopping the series. But I am excited to continue because the next one is my husband's favourite one, which is the kind of prequel one. It's the 4.5 book. So I'm excited to continue with that one and see how I fare. But it was fun. And then finally, with some series conclusions. First of all, kind of a conclusion. This one's a bit of a cheat, but I wanted to put it in the vlog. Is A River of Silver by Shannon Chakraborty, or S.A. Chakraborty. This is the collection of short stories from the Daevabad trilogy. Deleted scenes or continuations or prequels, chapters from the characters that she'd written, but there was no way to weave them into the current timeline narrative, etc. I really liked this. I love this world, so it was entirely possible that I was just reading this because I miss this world and I should probably just reread. But I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was a fun time. I actually really liked reading Muntadir. He's a character that really grew on me in the original series that I found absolutely fascinating. I am very excited to read more from Shannon Chakraborty because I feel like her writing style is so well put together already. It's so compulsively readable. I don't think there's ever going to be a book of hers that I wouldn't love. Short stories can be hit or miss for me, especially when they're just kind of like continuations within a series. They never rank very highly, but this one got a 4-star. I was happy to be back with these characters and back in this world, and it was a good substitute for not having the time to reread the series at the moment. Another series that I did conclude this month is the Lycanius trilogy by James Islington. The Light of All That Falls being the last book in the trilogy. It is a chunker, which is always a good thing in my opinion. Do you know what? This series really did get better with every installment. It really did have a good upward trajectory, which thank goodness, because I really struggled with book 1. Like, there were so many things that I disliked about book 1. The upward trajectory of this one was absolutely awesome, and I am so glad that I enjoyed it and that I was able to really sink into this series, and that, as I said, every installment just got better and better. I still got 4-star, like it's not a new favourite series, but given how low my opinions were going into book 2 after book 1 being such a letdown, each book getting that bit better and that bit more enticing is awesome. I do have a dedicated series review for this one also coming, so bear with me. And I'm going to leave the synopsis for this one out just because it is a really long-winded synopsis, and I've talked about it before, and as I said, I do have a series review coming, so I'm going to leave it and then I'll just direct you towards my series review when it comes out. But I had a great time with it. And the last one, the last series that I managed to conclude was the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik. I have been reading this series since March, League of Dragons being book 9 in this series, and this has been my read-along series for the year over on my channel, and I've had such an amazing time reading these books. I'm kind of sad to see the characters go. It ended really well. It wrapped up things in a way that I really appreciated, and it was, as always, very historically accurate, which is something that I always appreciate in this series, that even though you have dragons, it is historically accurate. That is because this series is a Napoleonic Wars but with dragons. You've heard me talk about it a million times, but in this series we are following Captain Will Lawrence, who is the captain of an English ship that overcomes a French vessel. The French vessel happens to be harbouring a dragon egg that is on the brink of hatching. Dragons being an invaluable resource in the war efforts, it needs to bond with an Englishman soon. With them being too far away from shore to be able to give him to the Dragon Corps, one of his crew has to take the hit. When the dragon then happens to choose Will, he now must set aside all he has known so he can become the constant companion to the fighting dragon Temeraire. This series has shown us all over the globe. It's taken us everywhere around the world during the Napoleonic Wars. It has lots of social criticisms of the time period, including colonialism, the slave trade, etc. And I have really enjoyed my time reading the series. There have been some dips in the series, but for the most part I've really enjoyed it. I do have a dedicated series review for this one also coming on the channel at some point soon, so do keep your eyes peeled for that one, because I need to talk to more people about this series, and especially people who are into history, because if you're a history nerd, the way that Naomi Novik managed to weave historical accuracy, global historical accuracy as well, not just France and England, into this series while still having dragons. If you're into military fantasy, like the fight scenes, the way that you have the flight formations and stuff, really cool. would highly recommend. And there you have it. There are all of the books that I have managed to read in November. Let me know what your thoughts are on any of these books. What was the best book that you read in November? That is all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye!